I say, starting with this anniversary festival, we run the city into the ground.
Hi guys. So today I'm gonna try and work on finishing up this thing we were working on last night. Tetra's chilling with us today. She's hanging out. She decided to come out from under her little cave bed thing that I have for her. Anyway, I'm just gonna jump right into it. We're working on a couple of loops, trying to make this thing as though a freshman made it, or something that a freshman could make for an example assignment. As usual, if you have any questions, let me know. If you have some code that you want to share, or you want me to look at, share it, the link in the Discord, and I can take a look. Preferably if you have GitHub, that'd be the easiest way for me to access and look at it. And if you just want to show it off, I'll check it out. So let's get started. So let's see, yesterday we left off with automating the boats. So like basically all those were created through just a series of loops that made them appear in different areas. Right now they're kind of limited off of the lower and right hand side of the grid, just so we didn't have any outside of bounds array situations, which is like an error that happens if you try to place something on a grid that in a spot that doesn't exist. So say this is like a 30 by 30 and you put something at a 31, then it won't appear. It'll actually give you an error and won't run. It won't compile. So in order to avoid that for now, we just and to make it run, we just went ahead and limited the placement to within a 20 by 20 space in the 30 by 30 grid. That's what we did here. So I can actually expand that, since we know that the boats are no bigger than 4 spaces. And when you're considering an array in programming, you have to consider it starts from 0 and it has as many spaces as the limit. So it'll stop at 1 at the limit minus 1, meaning if you have a 30 by 30 grid, it will consider this cell 0 and the final cell will be 29. Because that gives you 30 spaces, so 0 is counted as a space instead of 1. So that being said, we can set this, since we know that 4 is the amount of dots that we're going to get on this grid, and it is a 30 by 30. We will set it to 5. Yeah, 25, which will put us up to 29 maximum if it goes that far. So random 20, 25. And that should allow the program to use the whole grid. Let's see, so this is connected. And it should just automatically update when it's done. Yep, there we go. So now we have more scooted over here. What we don't also have a check for is overlapping. It doesn't look like that's what's happening here, but they are right next to each other. I guess we can work on that later. I think for right now it's placing them randomly, which is what matters. It better be random. So each time this function is called, it's supposed to get a new random number to start placing the first node in each boat. So the first dot is placed in a random location, and then depending on whether or not it's boat 1, 2, 3, or 4, it places another dot either down a column or down a row. So in this situation, here's the array. We have a 2D array is like a grid, and this is the row in this bracket, and this is the column in this one. So in this situation, for the first two boats, it's going to add 1 to the column, and then for the last two boats, it's going to add 1 to the row, and then place the dot there. And that's how we know that it's going to be vertical or horizontal. And then the random node where it starts is supposed to be this value right here. And this is supposed to call a random number from 0 to 25. Actually 24, so we could probably, because it takes 1, because it counts it from 0, just like the arrays, like I explained earlier. So this will count from 0 to 25, given this value is 26, I believe. I know that's how it works in Java. Sometimes the languages have different rules about that. Okay, so yep, we still have boats in the right spot. I'm going to test that a couple more times and have it place them randomly a couple of times to make sure that we're not going to get any out-of-bound array errors. And it looks like they're still giving us the same R value, which leads me to believe that this is not the final version of this that we need. So let's take a look here. Using namespace, yes. Not ideal, but yes. Yeah, so random should be giving us a random value, but it seems to be giving us the same value each time. So I'm looking at trying to figure out how to, because in Java it's random int, and then you can add the parameters between the numbers that you want. So like if you want a number between 5 and 10, you'll have 5 as the first argument and 10 as the second, or 11, I think, which will give you 5 to 11, or 5 to 10, sorry. Save some bandwidth by disconnecting there for a second. Hopefully we won't have any lagging issues like we did yesterday. I tried to re-optimize this morning, and I'm not 100% sure if it worked like it was supposed to. So we'll see. We're working with very little bandwidth at the moment, getting an internet upgrade in hopefully a week. So I see in a lot of cases with C++, they use max plus minimum value here, and that is what tells the computer that it needs to search between those two numbers. But that doesn't make sense, because it would, as far as I know about, that would just add this to 26, and it would be the same thing as using this. I don't see why that is necessary. So that's like the only other conclusion that I found. Tetra gets a cookie time while I wait for this page to load. Okay. So if I run it without these parameters, it will definitely, very likely go out of bounds when I try to run it in this. So that time the build succeeded, which means it didn't go out of bounds, which is interesting. Okay, yeah, it did. It did go out of bounds. I was about to say, that doesn't make sense. So we have like an error here. Alright, so that should have fixed that error. And we can get rid of this. Brighten that up a little bit. Cool. Okay. So the other thing we did yesterday was make it to where we can move this little block around, and it's a little fast, so I definitely want to work on getting this thing like better at stopping and reacting to input, because otherwise it's like really difficult to just click once and get it to move into that spot. Also, I need to make that appear over the boats. So yeah, when you press spacebar, if you're over top of that, that would be your selection, and it changes the look of that thing. So that works like it's supposed to still. We just need to make that button a little more sensitive. A good spot for that would be created. And you know, it could also save speed is if I just fix the frame rate a little. And if I added the button input to like the controls function and the draw goats within a normal frame rate, it would control how sensitive that button is, as well as the speed of the game. So it wouldn't be using as much hardware if that were limited. So I think that's what I'm going to do next, is create some sort of timer or like max frame rate limiting system, which is as easy as like two or three integers. So to start that, I'll go up here and create integers for max time, and we'll do something like 30 iterations, and current time, we'll just call it time, and we'll leave the current time at 0. Okay, so now with the current time at 0, we will, during the game loop, iterate through that. So if time is greater than or equal to max time, then we will run these functions instead of doing it every time the game loop iterates or repeats. So the only thing wrong with this now is time will never be greater than or equal to max time, because it doesn't increase every loop. So that means that down here, after each iteration, we will make time increase by 1. So you can write it with C++. You can write time ++, and that'll add 1 to an integer, or you can do plus equals 1. And the benefit of that would be, if you didn't want to just increment by 1, if you wanted to increment by like 5 or 6, you could do plus equals 5, and it'll add 5 each time. So that would make each time the game loop loops, it will be times value, current value, plus 5. But in this case, all we need is 1, and we can adjust the max time later if need be. So let's see if that slows it down. Oh, another thing that we need to do is once time is greater than or equal to max time, it'll never be 0 again. So it'll call this after, what did we say, 30 frames per second? What we did, or iterations? It's not really frames per second. That would be a different calculation. So every time, once this has gone up to 30, it'll start calling these every time the thing functions. So in order to keep it from doing that and only call every 30 iterations, we will set time back to 0 once it does this. And then it'll have to go 30 more times before it'll call this again. And that's how you can kind of limit the amount of times that these functions will be called. So you can't get to these until this is met. So that's a pretty basic, straightforward loop. Let me know if you have any questions about that. I can help run a few more examples if need be. All right, so let's see how much that slows it down. If it doesn't really slow it down enough, or if it slows it down too much, we can adjust it. But that should redraw these and allow us to change up a little bit of what we did. There we go. So see now, like it's moving, but it's very slow. So I'm holding down the button, and it's just very, very slow. That's a good thing, because it means it's working. But since it's so slow, I think I might speed it up some by decreasing the max time that it should wait. And I'll do that with 10. So 30 was really slow. We'll see how 10 does, and hopefully it'll be a pretty decent speed. Okay, so So it's a little bit faster, and there's definitely more control. Cool. So now I can definitely like pinpoint each separate one. But it is definitely still really slow. All right, so we can do it even faster. And something that you can't really see that is also happening here with having slowed down the controls is also the grid is redrawing itself only once every 5 or 10 seconds as well, whichever we set the max time to. So that definitely is saving some bandwidth for the user, and it's something that definitely should be considered when coding. What are some ways that you can save the hardware a little bit so that the game runs in a more optimal way? All right, so that's still a little bit slow. I'm actually going to knock it down to 3, and I think that'll be pretty good for where we're at with it. Trying to make it nice and smooth. Should be, anyways. Yeah, that seems to be working pretty well. Okay. Yep, so it's definitely a lot more manageable. Honestly, I might set it down to 2 because it's moving pretty fast. But there's still like moments where it's not quite responding to my clicks like I want it to. Sometimes you just gotta trial and error and see kind of how it feels, which is why it's good to have like live testing and just keep testing while you're running new code. Bridges, this API that I'm using is really good for that because you can just refresh like I'm doing right here. So every time I restart it, it just reconnects automatically, especially for the game's API functions, which is what I'm using. And it'll make the visualizations for you. Okay. So that's definitely faster. What I don't want is for it to skip spaces and click the wrong one, like that just did. That one might be too fast. Okay, so just because I think going slowly is not as bad as going too fast and actually clicking the wrong spot, I'm going to make it go back up to 3 for now, and leave it at that. And we can adjust that more later if need be, but for what we need here, I think that's fine, honestly. Okay. Yep. All right. Cool. Right back. Okay, so that's solved. Camera battery died again. I'm gonna have to figure out how to kind of more quickly fix that situation. Okay, so let's see. We're still connected. Yes. All right. So now that we have that, and we know that the buttons cause it to show up, cause this to show up. Let's see. What we want to do is make it so that you cannot see the boats, but they're more practical. So I think yesterday I was trying to figure out how to make the grid itself like smaller in size, and I had it set to, let's try a 10 by 10 and just see what happens, because I think that's one of the things is like I had it set to 10 by 10 and then it only like handled, like it was still a 30 by 30 grid, but the tops here it stopped at 10 and it just filled in that. So that's not what we want. Hopefully it won't do that today, and I think I figured out why it did that, and it's because I didn't set it in the class initializer. So I'll show you what that means in a second. Change these values. Tetra, stop. Jeez. She was like, acting like she wanted to lick the bed. It drives me nuts when she does that. Okay. So let's see, if it's 10 and we know that the spaces are 4, then we're going to need at least stop at 5. So that should limit the amount of space that these things start so that we don't go over. This needs to also be set to 5. And hopefully we won't get any out of bounds array exception issues. Here we go. So this is where I needed to set it yesterday, and I don't think that I did. But I'm not 100% that that's going to solve the issue. So we'll see. Okay, I think that's all of the numbers that we need to change. Which isn't too many, which isn't too bad. Normally I would set these to final variables so that I didn't have to change each of them. However, that's for inheritance and stuff like that. It's a little more advanced for a freshman and sophomore. I guess sophomores would start learning things like inheritance, where you actually pass variables that are predefined in different class definitions. So this entire page right here, this whole thing is a class, and and most programs have about, it can have up to hundreds of these, and instead of having to rewrite the same code over and over again, sort of like how we did with the placing boats yesterday, you put a certain amount of logic in here that you can reuse, and it's the same sort of idea with inheritance, where like you have an entire page like this that creates an entire game or a room in a game, and you can recall it multiple times in the entire program. So if I make another class that defines a specific type of character with strength or stamina and these different variables that I don't want to have to rewrite the math behind getting those stats for that character a million times, but I need to call that information a bunch of times, then I will just create its own class, and then I will call that class and create an instance of it, and it'll exist within I guess the game world that you created. So it's a little bit like very like touching the surface of what variables from inheritance are. So for this purpose, though, that's like more advanced than this. We're working on just a 2D grid, and I'm trying to limit the size of this grid so that we can have an easier time kind of finding these spaces, so we can test the game a little more easily, and then we can set difficulty levels using this bigger grid for like hard mode or like a longer game. So let's see if that works. If that doesn't work, I'll have to, I guess, look more into what's going on with the API. Yeah, see? So this is what happened yesterday. So I set it to 10, and it sets a 10 by 10 grid, so this just only covers 100 spaces. And it's interesting because it's still where the boat's on there like it was supposed to. But I definitely can't control it like I did before for some reason. So right now it seems to be hard-coded into a 30 by 30. Alright, so before I go any further, I kind of want to look into the Bridges API that we have here, because this is the one that we're using. This is the API that I work on that is actually allowing us to see these visualizations. And I want to see where this is being visualized, like the back end of this, to see if it is actually hard-coded to be a 30 by 30 grid, because that's kind of a problem. Ugh, the sun's coming out. Let's see. So if that's the case, then I think we might be able to correct it from here, and I can push those changes, because we definitely need to be able to reshape the grid for different size games. So let's see, here are the classes, and if anybody on here does do some coding and stuff and wants to mess with the API we have, just feel free to go on the Bridges GitHub, and you can pull this and actually alter the API yourself. You can use what we have there too if it helps on any of your projects. Especially because we use a lot of JSON to help send our visualizations over the server, and it's actually pretty fast. So some of that's in here in the rapid JSON file if you're interested. So I think GameBase would be the place to look. And inside GameBase we have an initializer which calls the function and sets the grid size. So in this situation, it does accept a varying number of grid sizes, but where is the visualizer? Let's see. Well, that doesn't make sense. So based on what I'm looking at here, I'm seeing that these arguments inside each function, so the colors of the different types of code and names and stuff change depending on which software you're using to write code on. This is Xcode. So in Xcode, and I left it at default, so I assume this is going to be like this for any MacBook Air that you might use. The function names themselves and the type of data they are, which is a string in this case, or well, you can have an integer there too, and those are going to be like kind of this bluish green, and then their arguments and stuff are going to be in this pink color. So that's how you know where the different functions are. Inside these brackets, right after a function name, you'll find arguments, and this tells you what type of data the argument is. And in this case, this one accepts two integers, one called row and one called column, and a named symbol, which is a data type that we created called an enum. And we defined what named symbols are in this program. And so this accepts three arguments, two ints, and a name symbol. And I was looking at the game base where it tells you about like which size the grid's going to be, which is our issue over here. And it's showing that it does accept specific arguments, including integers, and it's setting them to 10 when it's called. Which is weird. So I didn't create I created the Java version of this and worked on the Python version, and then the C++ version was translated very quickly over to be used, and we're still kind of fixing it up and making it work. So in this case, it looks like it was translated a little bit differently than the Java one was created, and I'm guessing because there was some issues with functionality crossover, like just trying to make it do pretty much the same thing. So in this case, it looks like when you initialize a game, it actually creates it'll accept an array or a list, which is like whatever size of the grid that you want. And I guess this sets it at 10, which is interesting. So let's see. This will accept, this is arguments. So we have our assignment ID, our username, our API key, number of rows, number of columns, or you can have assignment ID, username, API key, list with number of rows and number of columns. Interesting. Okay. So let's see if that requests anything. This is a Chilled Cow that I have playing in the background. I don't know if it's very quiet or very loud. If it's loud, let me know. But they are doing like a remix of a Hollow Knight background like theme music, and it's awesome right now. Hollow Knight's a great game. If you guys haven't played it yet, you should check it out. I liked it best on Switch of all the platforms that I played it on, because it's a really good kind of a game to play wherever. But it's got a very deep storyline, and believe it or not, a little bit of history of the game Hollow Knight, if you do end up checking it out, only 3 people made it. Team Cherry is the indie game group that created it. They are master game makers. I mean, just the 3 of them to make such a really full, good game is really nuts. think if I change this, okay, so that should be a new way to call it to change the size based on what we have in the API. Means we need to have matching arguments here. Oops. Okay, it seems to not be screaming at me about that, which is good news. We can stop screaming now. Okay, now we are running this, and hopefully it'll change the size. Fingers crossed. No, it didn't look like it changed it at all. Let me try to refresh this. It's being awfully slow. Ah, it did. It worked. Wonderful. Connect now and mess with that. Perfect. Okay, so there are two ways to initialize the grid, and this is definitely one of them, is to add the row and column to the function, to the initialization, which is here. So before, I had it set to where this did not exist, and you can actually call with just the API key, and the default size of the grid would be a 30 by 30. But in this case, we needed something a little bit bigger to deal with, so it's a little bit easier to mess with. Perfect. So that worked like we wanted it to. So for the sake of this stream, I think that's pretty good. We can try to stream some more tomorrow, but I think we've kind of gotten a little bit knocked out and covered quite a few kind of concepts. And if you guys want to follow along, let me know. I can link the API that does this to my Discord, and you guys can download it and start working on your own version. As you can see, it's pretty easy to mess with. Ooh, I just found an error. See, that's another reason it's good to just kind of sit around and test your game and stuff. Because I hit an error and I realized the reason is because under controls, I have a test to make sure that this little gray cursor, caret sort of thing, doesn't leave the grid. So it checks it against the 30/30 grid that we had before. And so if we go down to controls, oops, okay. So if we go down to controls, we will see that it's testing against grid columns and grid rows, which need to be limited back down to 9, so they don't go outside the grid. Okay, so that's that should handle that error issue, hopefully. If not, I'm not sure why it would give me another error like that. Okay. Wasn't that, because I did set that later. Figure out this one last bug before my camera battery dies again. Alright, so when I tried to move it down, I got an error. And it's like a row/column error. uncaught reception. Signal issue. Not a clue. Okay. Well, my thanks for the follow. Game Tester Estonia. Awesome. Thanks for the follow. I'm actually getting ready to head out soon. But if you program, definitely join my Discord and send us your GitHub or your wherever your website is, or show us some of your code. If you want to start programming and you don't yet, now's the time. Let's do it. I was just going over some of the basic concepts here of loops, and I talked a little bit about inheritance today. It's a little bit next level of a concept, so if you have any questions about that, definitely ask and get Discord. The only thing I ask is that you send pictures of your pets if you have them, because here we are all about the pets. Speaking of, Tetra, come here. We keep them around all the time. Animals are the best. So, yeah, if you don't have any pets, any pictures of animals are great, or memes, whichever. Anyway, Discord's always open. I try to just kind of be available on that all the time, because I'm usually doing some other work kind of like this. If my battery lasted forever on the camera, I'd probably do this more, but until I can get it permanently plugged in, limited. But this is also good to do in sections, because if you guys are following along, I want to make it a little bit easier. I think, one sec, let me see if I can link it to you guys. Should be on the channel thing there, but I think if we type !Discord, it'll pop up, but I'm not sure. Still getting used to setting up this Twitch stuff too. Internet's going slow. Come to life, please. Hello. Channel. Awesome. All right, thought so. Alrighty, let me get it sent over. Yeah, I just got the Discord back up and running too, and I added a new thing to it. New channel so that we can I'll talk about code. I definitely want to see everybody's stuff, because I mean the more I look at code, the better I get at it too. And eventually I want to set up a GitHub for this Twitch, so that we can post all our code on there and help each other with projects. At some point I would love to be able to build a whole project with the community. I think that would be a lot of fun, just fully open sourced, but I'm not 100% sure what we would have yet. So I kind of want to let it evolve into whatever we decide to create. If that's something you guys would be interested in, definitely let me know, and post your ideas. Let's see. I can open this up and share this link without it yelling at me. Where the heck is the chat? Tetra, stay. Where are you going? Hope you guys are doing good today. It's a happy Saturday. There's this. All right. that should link straight to it. And that way you guys can get on there and check it out, and hopefully we'll all learn some new stuff together. This what I have right here is just some pretty basic loop stuff. If you guys have something very specific that you want to check out, let me know. Like I will look over. I will learn something if I have to try something new on here, because I think that would be a lot of fun, especially if you guys are interested in checking it out. The only thing that I think that would be kind of difficult to do at the moment, because I'm still working on internet speeds, is trying to build a server. I have a little bit of experience with that, but it definitely takes up a little extra bandwidth, and I would be worried that it would lag the stream to death. But we could definitely try that sometime too, if you guys wanted to check that out and see how it worked. I would probably start with Apache, because it's a good place to start when you're building servers for the first time. And in the past, I've used a C++ language to send actual HTML through the server myself manually, and there's no reason for anybody to really have to do that, but I just did it because I wanted to try. Thanks for joining, Game Tester. But yeah, I really like doing pretty much anything hacky programming wise, and just trying to see what I can break, really. That ends up being what happens sometimes. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'm gonna head out, but I will definitely be back here this week. The days that I commit to are Saturdays, because it's a good day for me to stream, and I try to come on between 4:30 and 5:30, and stay on for at least an hour. And I try to stream too during the week, but it usually happens at night. Like the past couple of days, I've been streaming around 12, because that's usually when I'm up and too tired to do anything difficult. So I'll just do a couple of these small projects at night as I wind down. But yeah, thanks for watching, and definitely see you guys on Discord. Bye.